Okay, now lastly, on prompt 3, we're going to look at whether serial killers are born versus made. I think the recent content that we learned in class has led me to believe that a lot of it is the nurture part. So, nature versus nurture. That people that are prone to these types of behaviors are kind of molded, especially in childhood, to become killers. So, I mean, historically, we see a lot of people that experience childhood neglect or abuse. And I thought that a lot of people that, especially like men, well, I guess both men and women, I thought rejection was really like a prominent theme in the patterns that we saw. So whether they're like adopted or rejected by their parents or rejected by their peers, they're not able to cope with like the yucky feelings that are associated with that, and it just manifests into like these really nasty behaviors. Um, and and there's other things too. I mean, it's not always like a terrible childhood. It could be like a traumatic brain injury or an accident that traumatized somebody. And that especially like in childhood and adolescence where whether their brain is injured and they're not able to make executive functions anymore, or their emotions or relationships are hindered because of an injury to the brain. I kind of was like looking into any outliers because it seems like all of the stories or the cases that we learned about really were like involving like childhood how am I gonna say this, like really traumatizing or terrible events in childhood that made them do these bad things. So anyway, back to what I was saying. I was looking for outliers, and I remember this podcast that I listened to about this serial killer in Pakistan. His name was Javed Iqbar, and he killed 100 children. And he, tortured and raped them and all those great things. But he was interesting because I remember the narrators of the podcast talking about how he grew up in a really like wealthy family in Pakistan, and he was pretty much like given the world on a platter. And I think that even it's my assumption that and after some research too, I found that his parents really like rewarded his bad behavior. So he was kind of like a jerk as a young man and as a child. And instead of like reprimanding him or him being punished, they just kind of bailed him out and gave him money to just get out of every situation that they could. And even in like his personal life, he had issues with his wife, and they just made everything really easy for him, is what I'm trying to say. And I think that might have played a role into why he committed those crimes, because there's no reports of him being like abused as a child or any injuries or anything like that. And then the more I dug into it, I also found out that he was exposed to disturbing porn when he was young. So like seeing all these graphic images that were like sadistic and nature, it might have fueled him to want to act out these desires. And we've learned about that in class too, how when you get like this repeated exposure to violent pornography or whatever you want to call them, like the black or the dark web films, you get kind of desensitized to the terrible things that I guess no, you get desensitized, and then you start to fantasize about them because your threshold for what makes you aroused gets higher and higher and higher, and you keep seeking more and more violent things to get that satisfaction until you have to carry them out. And then I also wonder too with him, he was the youngest of, I think, of 6 kids. And when your parents are really wealthy, they're probably really busy, like business people. And he's the last of 6 kids, and maybe he was neglected in some form. Maybe and I didn't read a lot about this. There wasn't a lot about his childhood, but this is just my thoughts on it. And maybe he didn't get the attention from his parents. It said that his father was, out of town a lot, and really just kind of like showed his affection by just paying for everything all the time. And so that maybe could have, just somehow molded him into somebody that didn't have a lot of empathy for other people, because he didn't have that close connection with his parents when he was younger. But that's just a guess. But it was really hard for me to come up with. I tried to look into killers that were really just born killers, and it was really hard to find anyone. And, he was the first guy that came to mind, so I thought I'd share him as an example. Anyway, so yeah, that's my answer. I think that they are nurtured and they are made into serial killers by unfortunate events in their lives, and they're not able to cope with the terrible feelings that they have. And a lot of the times that's why they kind of manifest their feelings into violent acts. And I think that's it. So thank you for listening, and I'll see you later.